He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, but people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state when that light turns red. So don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fith chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spitting the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fith chapter. That's right. Welcome to the Fith chapter. I am Brian Chapman. He is Dennis Fithian, and we're ready to go for episode number 83. And if you are a Michigan fan out there, a little bit of a disappointment about what just transpired on ESPN for probably two reasons, Dennis.
Well, I got 100 reasons that I can tell you in a half point to tell you why I didn't like what just went down.
Yeah, we'll get to that coming up in the major wager. The two reasons that I was referencing was number one, because of the overtime game of Baylor versus West Virginia. Michigan fans who don't have or don't know how to access ESPN News or the ESPN app missed the start of the game that they were perhaps more interested in. And number two, there was a blown opportunity for Michigan to put some distance between themselves and whoever the number 3 team in the country happens to be. But obviously Michigan will try to take care of their business on the court tonight against Illinois, who doesn't have Ayo Dosunmu on hand. He's missing, a third straight game with a facial injury?
Yeah.
So the Big Ten's leading scorer out. We'll definitely want to thank everybody for tuning in for episode 83. We've got 5 more fantastic chapters for you. Thanks to everyone who is watching via YouTube, via Twitch, and via Facebook Live. Also, thanks to those who are listening to the podcast via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. That will be available at approximately 11 o'clock on the day of each show. Make sure that you like, make sure you subscribe, and make sure you participate in each show by sending in your feedback via Facebook Live and via YouTube. Dennis will be reading it throughout the course of the show. Let's take a look now at today's book. And as you can see in the second chapter, Mel Kiper Jr. had one of his pre-draft teleconferences. He said at number 7, the Lions should not take a quarterback. We'll tell you what he said and why, and also why he likes a wide receiver over Micah Parsons. In the third chapter, Jj Watt has chosen his team. It's an NFC West team. Is that team now the favorite to win that division over Matthew Stafford's Rams, over Russell Wilson's Seahawks, if he's even going to be there next year? In the fourth chapter, J.I. Block M. Harbaugh does it again. He came in getting transfer quarterbacks, and he's still getting transfer quarterbacks. Should this guy be the one to start at quarterback in 2021 at the start of the season? And will this transfer quarterback finally be a first-round pick? And then, of course, in the fifth chapter, we'll get to the major wager and why Dennis might be a little bit upset. But we'll start off with the first chapter, and that takes us to Michigan basketball. And whoever thought we'd be talking about this much Michigan basketball in March, but here it is. And Michigan's playing right now. If you're watching the show, we appreciate you watching. We'll try to keep you up to date. Right now it is 12-10 Illinois over Michigan. But they are coming off another easy win over the weekend. They beat the Hoosiers 73-57. You couple that with Baylor's loss over the weekend to Kansas, and Michigan is now number 2 in the AP poll. They've got 4 first-place votes in that AP poll, but they're still behind Gonzaga, who just finished their season undefeated. Michigan obviously had a tougher schedule, but Gonzaga won all 24 of their games. They won 23 of their games by double digits, including the last 21 in a row by double digits. Dennis, if Michigan wins out before Selection Sunday, should they get the number 1 overall seed over Gonzaga? And how much does that even matter?
Well, it matters a little bit. I think if Michigan is impressive and beats Illinois and then beats Michigan State 2 times, and you look at Ken Pom, and KenPom.com puts Michigan in front of Gonzaga in the net rankings. If Michigan gets put in front of Gonzaga, then I think if you're a voter, you should be compelled to put Michigan above Gonzaga. Now, course, Michigan loses one of those. That's not going to happen. But does it matter? It matters where you come down and you start to take a look at the draw. And if you think that you look at Gonzaga's draw and you say, man, that's a cakewalk to the Final Four. And if you look at Michigan's, let's just say, the seeding holds up where, Michigan's the second overall seed, even though they'd have a 1 seed, and you'd look and say, man, they got a tough draw. Well, then you can complain. But, those are the kind of things that you look at. It's a nice feather in your cap for a week, too, being the number 1 overall seed. I mean, you could, puff your chest out a little bit. But the one thing about Michigan is that they're playing the best basketball in the country against the best teams in the country in the Big Ten. So they have it there. It feels like it looks like they are the number 1 team, but I would still keep Gonzaga there because they're undefeated. And they can't help the conference that they play in. And they tried, it's too bad that they weren't able to play Baylor. That game ended up getting canceled, but they played Iowa, ran them off the floor. They played Kansas and beat them by double digits. They only had one game. You mentioned all the games that they won. They've only had one game that went final that was in single digits, and that was way back early in December in the Jimmy V Classic in Indianapolis against West Virginia. Other than that, they're taking the teams out to the woodshed and doing what they're supposed to do. And if you watch them play, if they lack some size or, they look like this little team that could or something, you'd say, you know what, come on, they don't pass the look test. But, they've got they might have the number 1 overall pick in Suggs, Kispert. I mean, they've got 3 guys that, you could say could be All-Americans or Player of the Year nationally. So, they're stacked and they're doing what they have to do. But, it's a great argument. Does it matter? No, just in how you feel and a feather in your cap, and if you like to complain.
If you like to complain. When I look at this, I don't really know who should be the number 1 overall seed. I mean, it's a situation where I say if Michigan wins out, it's like 1A, 1B no matter what. If you put Gonzaga number 1 overall, or you put Michigan number 1 overall, is it really going to matter? Perhaps it matters in the Final Four because the number 2 overall seed would have to face Gonzaga as opposed to maybe Illinois, maybe Ohio State, maybe West Virginia, maybe who knows. But if these 2 teams get to the championship game, then it just turns into who's wearing a white jersey and who's wearing a blue jersey. Clearly, Gonzaga had the easier schedule, and they didn't play any ranked teams in their conference schedule. But when you look at their schedule, and you mentioned how they beat West Virginia by 5, and that was their closest game all year. They also played many other ranked teams that are still currently ranked, and they beat them by double digits. You look at Virginia, they're currently ranked 21. They beat them by 23 points. They played Iowa just like Michigan did. Iowa's currently ranked 5th, and they beat Iowa by 11. They beat Kansas by 12. Kansas is currently ranked 13 points. So their non-conference schedule was certainly not soft. Their conference schedule was soft, and that's why you have that big discrepancy between the strength of schedule when you compare Michigan and Gonzaga. But I think Michigan is probably the better team. I just don't know because of the huge discrepancy over the last couple of months between who they played. Both have been dominant. Michigan has the 1 loss with the tougher schedule. If the teams were to play right now, I would probably bet on Michigan. But I don't think that the number 1 seed is going to matter. You say that it's not going to matter unless you just like to complain. I think that it's not going to matter.
When you look at the draw, sometimes you look at the draw and it happens every year. You take the bracket out and you look at somebody's path and you say, wow, that's a cakewalk. And if that's the way it looks for Gonzaga, and if it looks tougher for Michigan, you can say, hey, you're getting jobbed. You know what? It feels really important until they throw the ball up.
Well, that, and also this year, they don't have to worry about fighting for playing in a particular region, because typically Gonzaga would say we want to play in the West so that our fans can drive to Seattle for the first round game, or it's a short drive to Boise for our first round game. And Michigan would say we want to either be in the Midwest or the East so that we can have our first and second weekend games in a close place. But there aren't going to be any fans, and the games are all going to be in Indianapolis. So if Michigan's in the West and Gonzaga is in the South, it really doesn't matter what region they're in. So I think from that standpoint, it doesn't matter where you are in terms of the number 1 overall seed. It just matters that you're going to get a number 1 seed.
Yeah, hey, you want to drive to, West Indianapolis or South Indianapolis, whatever it is, Hinkle Fieldhouse. Yeah, that's a good point about but the thing was, Michigan would be in the Midwest, and Gonzaga would be out west. There's no doubt about that. I really think about it. It's one of those things that you look to feel kind of slighted, and you feel like you're the number one team. Plus, you're always looking to justify yourself and validate yourself. And if you're Michigan over there, it's been a steady climb, and here they are, number two. Most people, not just us talking about it, you'd say, hey, who's the best conference? Oh, it's the Big Ten. Who's the best team in the best conference? It's Michigan. Who's playing all of these teams and wiping the floor with them? It's Michigan. So, and it's an easy argument when you look over and you say, Gonzaga looks like they're playing a bunch of middle schools. So, there's
they have been lately. But when they play them, like you mentioned, they've been crushing them. They have 21 consecutive double-digit victories, which I believe is an all-time record or tie for an all-time record. You just don't see that. And then 23 out of 24 double-digit victories, including all those ranked teams. It's not like when they're playing ranked teams, they're having to go into triple overtime and they needed the opposition star player to miss the game due to coronavirus to win. It doesn't matter who you put up against either one of these teams. They win them all, except when Eli Brooks missed a game.
Yeah, if there's one thing I would rather, like, if it just ends up 1-2, that's fine. We'll argue about it and look at the draws and everything else. But, since Gonzaga really only has to show up, they haven't had to show up in a long time. I mean, they can take these games off. Michigan, if they win tonight against Illinois, we'll see what kind of focus and intensity they have over these next two games with Michigan State if they have everything all locked up. Mm-hmm. You would think because it's a rival and they won't have any issue with, just like, hey, cruising to the finish line.
Spartans will win one of them. Spartans will win one of the two games.
Well, and that might be good for Michigan and anything else, but the one thing about it is if you're Gonzaga, you haven't been tested. If you haven't been tested in over a month and you're just sitting there, I would rather have that sharpened steel if you're Michigan, where every game that you go out there, you feel like you're playing a team that could be in the Final Four. Certainly, like that's tonight. They're playing another one seed in Iowa. They just played Illinois. They played Iowa. They're playing teams that people think they can get to the Final Four. It's been a long time since Gonzaga's done that. So even if you're Michigan and you're complaining, you want the number one overall seed because it's a feather in your cap, it looks good on Twitter and all those kind of things, and gives you something to argue about. And if you end up liking the draw, you just say, hey, look, you'd rather be, battle tested is what you want. Yeah. You feel like you're more recently been battle tested.
That's the perfect term, because I think that when you think about who is more likely to be upset in the NCAA tournament, let's say before you get to the Final Four, it's not going to be a team that hasn't been playing great teams all year. It's going to be a team that all of a sudden has to play one. Now, one of the benefits of being a number one seed is that you get to ease into it. You're not going to play any great teams until at least the Sweet 16. That first round, you get a number 16 seed, and while one 16 seed did win one time, it's highly unlikely. Then that second round, there's a chance you could lose, but given how great both of these teams have been, it's highly unlikely that they're going to win in an even stiffer test against an 8 seed or a 9 seed. Then you get to that third round, and Michigan's going to play a team that they played, in terms of caliber, a team that they played all year long. It could be a Big Ten rival, could be an ACC, SEC, could be some other mid-major team that rises up. But if they play a 4 or 5 seed, that's nothing new for Michigan, but it will be perhaps a little bit of a shock to the system from Gonzaga. And will a 6 team followed by an 8 and then a 3-4 day rest be enough to get Gonzaga ready? We'll see.
Yeah, we can say whatever we want, but if we get to that point and Michigan does win these games and Gonzaga does and Michigan's the number 2 and the draw comes out, you look at the 8-9 game and Oklahoma State's sitting there and you're Michigan, you're like, come on, that's a cakewalk for Gonzaga.
Well, Oklahoma State's ranked now. Oklahoma State just keeps on winning.
Well, they are. That was just an example. Whoever else, like you would put over there, let's say it would be USC. I don't know, would they be an 8-9 team? And they've got Mobley there, who's going to be a top 5 pick. You don't want to go up against Cade Cunningham. You don't want to go up against Evan Mobley. Mm-hmm. You'll want to avoid a guy that's going to be a
lottery
top 5 pick,
yeah.
Right? And like a second round matchup. And those are the kind of things like Monday through Friday. They do a lot of teeth gnashing if you feel like you should have the number 1 overall seed. It's about that draw. Once the ball goes up, how many times things have looked like a real hard draw, and then there's some upsets, and then it looks like it's an easy draw, those kind of things. So you got to be ready for all of that.
Well, and that's the one thing we've talked about that Michigan hasn't faced. And now, to be fair, given the soft schedule, Gonzaga hasn't faced it either, but Michigan hasn't faced lottery picks this season because there really aren't any in the Big Ten, but certainly in the West Coast Conference, you're not looking at any lottery picks.
No, not unless you play in the Big 12 and you run up against Cunningham, or if you've hit USC. I mean, that's it.
And then Michigan Texas today got to avoid the sumo.
Yeah, that was a break for him. That was a break. Yep. And their head coach, Brad Underwood, has made it, pretty clear that he's upset with Michigan, postponing that game when they probably could have played, but they were coming off that pause, and they're like, watched Michigan State and some other teams, look like crap. And they're like, let's go ahead and just push this game back if we can. I thought it was a smart move, but a lot of crying going on. The Crying Illini, they've been dubbed this week.
Yeah, what kind of feedback are we getting?
We are getting Sideshow Raj. It's always good to see him in there. And he's a big Michigan fan. Says, go blue. He's got a question for you.
Okay.
Chappie.
That's me.
Who do you like in the Adesanya and Nunez fight this weekend?
Adesanya and Nunez.
Sorry.
Well, obviously Amanda Nunez is going to win because she always wins. I think she's clearly passed Ronda Rousey as the best women's MMA fighter of all time. Now, if you're thinking about betting on the fight, you have to look at you got to go a little bit deeper than who's going to win, because I just glanced at it either yesterday or earlier today, and it was like Amanda Nunes minus 1,100. I mean, that's not. I mean, because she's so dominant, you're going to have odds like that if you just take the win. Now, if you want to do something like she's going to get the knockout in the first round, or the knockout, or the fight's going to last less than a round and a half, that's where I think there might be some value. But certainly Nunes is going to win. I saw something interesting about a half an hour ago about how Israel Adesanya is not going to bulk up after he weighs in. I think he's going to be coming in 10 pounds below the weight limit. So that'll be something interesting to see. I haven't looked too intently into that fight yet. Maybe I'll have some more information for you on Thursday. But Adesanya is a tough out, certainly. But certainly when it comes to Nunes, she's going to win, and it's about how quickly she's going to knock out her opponent.
Yeah, go get some steak and potatoes. Put 10 pounds on, man, if you can do it in the fight. That sounds like the way to go to me. Mm-hmm. Beth on Facebook telling us to remember MSU when they lost to Middle Tennessee State. They were predicted to go all the way. So, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of instances where you could talk about where teams that you thought were going to go all the way, but it is the most recent one where you thought about Michigan State, like, oh man, this team, everybody was picking Michigan State. Oh, Tom Izzo's going to get his second ring, and then they got popped by Middle Tennessee State. Actually, it was 2 years in a row, right? Because everybody wanted to go to Little Caesars Arena, and State got there and then lost to Syracuse, right?
Yeah. When Tom Izzo decided he wanted to bench Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yeah, and against Middle Tennessee State and Giddy Potts, you could say, oh, anybody would have lost to Giddy Potts at Middle Tennessee State. Izzo didn't call a timeout until they were down 15-2. You're like, that's one of the most ridiculous coaching moves I've ever seen.
Yep.
Yeah, Beth, good call. All right, we're ready to move on.
All right, let's turn the page now to the second chapter.
Oh, that gets us to some Lions draft talk. I was watching Dan Campbell, 8 o'clock this morning on YouTube in his second news conference. Brad Holmes followed him, but Mel Kiper making some news here in Detroit, because Kiper came out and said that the Lions should not consider taking a quarterback at 7. And he wasn't done there. He said the Lions should build around Jared Goff. What do you think about those two opinions?
Well, I think that there's going to be a lot of talk amongst Lions fans about that, because a lot of Lions fans view Jared Goff as just a stopgap quarterback, and a lot of Lions fans look at the defense and say that was the reason why they were so terrible last year. Therefore, they need to go out and get the best defensive player available. The linebackers have been so bad. What's wrong with drafting Micah Parsons at 7? Now, when you look at his individual quote about the quarterbacks. So I'll start there. He said, "I would not consider a quarterback if I were the Lions. I think Jared Goff is a 26-year-old quarterback who has been to a Super Bowl, was off to the races as a great number 1 overall pick and all that. Now you have people that are familiar with him. He's familiar in terms of the front office. To me, you build around that quarterback." And I lean toward what Kiper is saying about drafting a quarterback, but I'm not all the way there with him because his direct quote was, "I would not consider a quarterback if I were the Lions." I don't think that it's right to say that you're not going to consider one. I think it makes sense if you're sitting at 7 to consider one. The guy that I like who could fall to number 7 based on some of these mock drafts and based on the stupidity of some other organizations would be Justin Fields. I wouldn't consider taking Wilson there. I wouldn't consider taking Lance there. I wouldn't consider taking Mac Jones there. But if Fields is there at number 7, I would. I think there are a lot of reasons to pass up on a quarterback at number 7. First of all, the team is going to be terrible in 2021 regardless of who the quarterback is. So if they want one in the 2022 class, because Goff is terrible, they'll have the chance to draft him. Also, you have to look at Anthony Lynn. He was a quarterback, or he was the head coach of the Chargers last year. He's the OC of the Lions this year. He worked wonders with Herbert in 1 year. Why not give him a chance with Goff in 1 year to see if he can bring him back to Pro Bowl level or at least close to it? Third of all, Goff is only 26. He's a 2-time Pro Bowler. He's entering the first year of a 4-year, $134 million deal. Does it really make sense to draft his replacement before he's taken his first training camp snap in that $134 million deal? I also think this is important. The best way to compete for a Super Bowl, as we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, is with a quarterback on a cheap rookie deal like what the Chiefs did. Now that they have Mahomes on that $500 million deal, they have to put cheaper pieces around him. But if the Lions are going to compete for a championship, which is, crazy to think about because they've always been a bottom feeder. And, regardless of who the quarterback is for next year, the roster is going to be so bad. Don't waste one of those rookie years on his deal this year when you can't compete at all. Why not push it back a year so that in that 5-year window, the rookie deal, you get 3 or 4 years to compete if everything goes well, as opposed to 2 or 3 years to compete?
Yeah, those are all fine points. I think the difference between you and I is that I look at the quarterbacks there at 7, and if Fields is there, I would take him because I think he's a franchise quarterback, but I think the same thing about Zach Wilson, and that's why I would pull the trigger there. So I would consider it. I would also consider Lance later on if they move down. I think the thing that you say about getting on the rookie deal is correct. But if you look, Patrick Mahomes sat his entire first year. He played the final game for the Chiefs. And so if you like what you see next year, let's just say it's Fields and he falls to 7 and the Lions pick him there at 7. And, you play Jared Goff all next year and, you see where you're at there. Fields isn't playing, and if you like where Fields is at, well, you just make Goff the backup. He'll be a high-paid backup, but you get Fields out there and make him the quarterback.
$134 million backup.
That's it, So, and who knows if you're going to end up playing him. You've got that bridge quarterback back and forth. So you got 2 years to play with, and they don't have to take one. But if they like one of the guys there at 7, they should. The thing about building around Goff, like you can say that if you're the Lions and everything else, but you also have to be honest with yourself. Should they? I thought they were taking the long view, and the long view is not, hey, let's get as many weapons as we can for Jared Goff, so he can succeed. He's not a rookie quarterback that it's Goff. You're not going to be tied to Goff if you're the staff about whether you make it or break it. You're going to be tied to the next quarterback. So, it's going to suck for Goff because I don't think they are going to. And then we'll know with Kenny Golladay and what else they put around him. I don't think that the Lions are going to be, going hell bent on, breaking their cap to put a bunch of things around Jared Goff and make sure that they're building around Jared Goff. I don't agree with that part at all.
Well, let me go back to your Patrick Mahomes point because I think it is fair to say that Patrick Mahomes sat for a year. He basically started the last game of that regular season before the Chiefs went to the playoffs, and then he started the next year after they got rid of Alex Smith. But here's the difference. Patrick Mahomes got to a team that was 1 year away from competing for a Super Bowl. The Lions are not 1 year away from competing for a Super Bowl. If everything goes well and they draft a quarterback in 2022, then at that point they could sit him behind Jared Goff, and they might be 1 year away from a Super Bowl, where they could sit Goff for the first 15, or sit the new quarterback for the first 15 games of the season, and then start him in the 16th game, just like the Chiefs did. And then after the Lions lose in the first round of the playoffs, get rid of Goff, because the contract is much easier to get rid of after the second year, and put in this new guy so that you can have Patrick Mahomes 2.0. But the Lions don't have the pieces right now in place to be like the Chiefs were the year before Patrick Mahomes took over at quarterback. That's why I like the idea of waiting a year to draft the quarterback.
Unless it's Fields.
Unless it's Fields, and that's why the term consider is so important, because if Fields is there, I think he's such a great player that you have to at least consider. Mel Kiper Jr., the guy you see right there, says the Lions should not even consider a quarterback. I think that that Zach Wilson could be a franchise quarterback just like you do, but not on the same level that I think Fields is at.
Yeah, so that's only the difference. Like, I get what Mel Kiper's saying, and the part about having the rookie deal. That's all important stuff, and the terms or the phrase building, build around Jared Goff. I mean, that's not really music to my ears. But
well, that's if he sucks.
Yeah, So, but you're also you're showing, like, if they tag and trade Kenny Golladay, or if he's out of town, you get a wide receiving core out there. It's like, you're gonna know what they feel about Jared Goff, and whether they really feel like he's some franchise quarterback, or if he's just some placeholder until they find a QB.
Yeah,
we're gonna find that out pretty quickly.
If he's a placeholder, then he will show it on the field. And if Anthony Lynn can't turn him around after what he was able to do with Justin Herbert, and Justin Herbert, he didn't have a bunch of Pro Bowl wide receivers with the Chargers, so. Obviously, if you look at what the Lions have right now, it looks even worse. I have to imagine that they're going to upgrade from whatever they have right now. If you assume that Golladay, Amendola, and Jones are gone, they're not going to go into the season with Quintez Cephas as the number one pick, or the number one wide receiver. I would assume they're going to get at least a couple of guys who are number 3 worthy, perhaps a number 2 and a number 3 worthy receiver, and they might go with a receiver on day 2, or a couple of guys in day 3 who could compete. But that's where you get to the second part of what Mel Kiper Jr. says, and he said a wide receiver is a better choice than Micah Parsons, and he wouldn't consider Micah Parsons there. I look at wide receiver and linebacker as the 2 biggest needs on the team, and you need to just go with whoever is rated highest on your board. The Lions don't have great linebackers. They don't have good linebackers. You could say they don't even have okay linebackers, and Micah Parsons has an opportunity to be an awesome linebacker. And if we see in free agency that they don't sign multiple good starting linebackers, then all of a sudden Parsons becomes at the top of the list. If they don't sign a couple of decent wide receivers, or they just sign one number 3 caliber wide receiver, then all of a sudden Chase, Waddle, Smith, they become top options. I think a lot of this will sort itself out based on what happens in the next couple of weeks in free agency.
Yeah, and I thought Dan Campbell, he didn't tip his hand, but I thought that at the one point early in the press conference today, he was like, "Yeah, we need wide receivers, we need corners." Like, he was pretty candid about that. So maybe that tipped his hand on what they feel about what they're going to do with Kenny Golladay. Because if you don't have him, you really need a wide receiver for sure, as you're talking about. And you know what? The thing about Devontae Smith and Waddle and Chase, I like all 3 of those guys. So I like those 3. And you sitting there at 7, you got a bunch of choices. And, I like what's not to like about Micah Parsons. I know they this week.
There's nothing not to like about him.
Well, they've been bringing up his character because he had the red flag, because he got in a fight, the one that James Franklin said, "Let's not go to the police on." That, I don't know how you feel about that or not. Like, whatever that fight was about, he got in a fight, and his coach said, "Let's keep it in house." I mean, that's if that's the worst thing, that his worst transgression, then I'm all right with that.
Yeah, I think that I'm right with you there. And in terms of his ability on the field, there's nothing to question there. It's not like he ever got suspended or anything like that. So and once again, the need is equal and great for wide receiver and at linebacker. If they take Parsons in the first round, then they perhaps will take a wide receiver in the second round. If they take Jalen Waddle in the first round, then perhaps they'll take a linebacker in the second and the third round.
Raj on the live chat on YouTube, and if you're out there watching, go ahead, type away an opinion, a question. Didn't mean to burp right into the microphone.
Yuck!
We'll answer them. Yeah, it's gross. Sometimes it's nice being remote, not sitting across from somebody at the table. Raj says, no need to take – is this Raj or is this Mel? No need to take a QB at 7. Build around Goff and fill the roster out. He mentions Devontae Smith at 7. Then I like Kwity Paye in the second round.
I'm still trying to figure out where Kwity Paye is going to land. I've seen that his stock has been anywhere from just outside the top 10 to maybe the 20s, and I think I saw a mock draft recently that didn't have him in the first round. We'll have to see perhaps what happens when we get to the combine, which I believe that's later this month. So, and it's going to be a virtual combine, which is going to be a heck of a lot.
Well, he'll do great in the combine. He'll do great in the combine. He'll have monster numbers there. But, there's always a half dozen guys that you feel like they're in the later or the back half of the second round that fall to the, early in the first round. Might even be like 10 guys that'll be like that. So Kwity Paye could fall there. I'll tell you what, Raj, if I could walk away today here with Devontae Smith and Kwity Paye, I'll sign up for that.
Yeah, that because the Lions, another area of need is going to be defensive end, and they also have to figure out what they're going to do with Aquara.
Yeah, well, if they don't franchise tag Kenny G, he would be a candidate.
Yeah, and would he even be worthy of a franchise tag? That's a question as well.
Very question. Maybe that's a very good question. Maybe that'll be a chapter coming up for Thursday's show.
That's a possibility.
Maybe footnote that. We'll see if we can go with it. Maybe we'll know by then.
Okay.
All right. Let's turn the page.
All right, let's turn the page now to the third chapter. And that takes us to the Jj Watts Sweepstakes when his former teammate Deshaun Watson asked to leave the Texans. Obviously, the Texans just ignored him and said, we're not going to trade you. We have no interest in trading you. They've told all the teams that. They've told all the media that. And they have not budged so far. But when Jj Watt said, I want to leave, they just released him. That started a bidding war, we think, for his services. And then earlier this week, Watt decided to sign, not with his brothers in Pittsburgh or in Green Bay, a conference championship team, or with the Bills, a conference championship team. He signed with a non-playoff team. He's staying in the Southwest with the Arizona Cardinals. The deal is 2 years, $31 million, $23 million guaranteed. He joins a team that went 500 last year, third in the NFC West. And he's obviously got a big name for his first 5 years in the league. And he's riding out that big name because in the last 5 years, his production has plummeted, partially due to his injuries. Last year, he played in all 16 games and got just 5 sacks. Dennis, what do you think about this deal for the Cardinals? And do you think, more importantly, this moves the Cardinals to the top of the NFC West?
I don't on the second half. I think they'll be good, but considering the other teams there, I'm not picking them to win the NFC West. I think the Cardinals paid more for Jj Watt the name than Jj Watt the player and what you're going to get there, and that's always dangerous. I mean, the fans, they'll see that it's a huge name. Guy's going to be in the NFL. Guy's going to be a Hall of Famer. It's like, whoa, this guy's awesome. Just think, but you're thinking about the Jj Watt from 4 years ago that is the player of the year, not the one that's you'll be lucky to play 16 games. But it's a risk. I think it's too much money. I wouldn't have done that if I was the Cards. But here we are. As far as where they fit, I'll ask you. I don't have the Cardinals finishing first or second in the NFC West. What about you?
No, my rankings are number 1, 49ers, number 2, Rams, number 3, Seahawks, number 4, Cardinals. So I've got them last, and I don't think that this really moves the needle at all in terms of Jj Watt signing. I mean, you said that he was Player of the Year 4 years ago. I mean, that 4 years ago he had an injured year. It was the first 5 years he was so great, and then in the last 5 years he's played 16 games twice, last year and then in 2018, and in those other 3 years he played 3 games, 5 games, and 8 games, so 16 games combined in the 3 injured years. You look at the contract and it suggests a bidding war. I like your terminology of the Cardinals paid for Jj Watt the name, but playing in 48 out of a possible 80 games over 5 years, racking up 26.5 sacks in those 5 years, and in 1 year, 2018, getting 16 sacks, so in the other 4 years, having a combined 10.5 sacks. That's not, for me, a reason to go pay $31 million or whatever it is for 2 years for this guy. You look at last year when he played every single game, his tackles were down. Once again, only 5 sacks. He didn't have injuries to keep him off the field. He just wasn't the same player. So they're bringing in a certainly injury-plagued player whose production is dropping. And I'll give you a comparison. Maybe it's not, I think it's apples to apples, but it might not be Macintosh to Macintosh. It might be Macintosh to Golden Delicious. But J.J. Watt is, I think, like Blake Griffin at this point. Griffin was hurt when he came to Detroit. He had one great year, which could be equivalent to the 2018 season when Watt played the 16 games and the 16 sacks, and Griffin was able to make an all-star game and lead the Pistons to the playoffs. And then when he was hurt the last couple years, Griffin wasn't good anymore. Watt's been healthy enough to play this past year, but didn't put up Pro Bowl numbers. And last year, he was healthy enough to play, I believe it was 8 games. So I think that it would be much like if a team was able to get Blake Griffin when the Pistons finally decide to buy him out. There will be some fans from a fan base who say, hey, we're getting Blake Griffin. But once he starts playing, they're going to say, he's not that good.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. The reason I didn't put the Cards in the basement in the NFC West is the question mark with Russell Wilson. It really feels like that there's going to be a deal there. So just as it sits right today, I feel like Wilson's going to be out, so I put the Seahawks in the basement there. I put the Cards at 3. As much as I would like to go with the 49ers, and I hope you're right because I'm rooting against the Rams. As you know, it's tied to compensation for the Lions. The thing that you got to remember about the 49ers last year is they were hit with the injury bug more than any team in the NFL when Bosa went down. Then it was
True.
Solomon Thomas, and then it was Kittle, and then it was Jimmy G, which nobody's a huge fan of Jimmy G, but also he did go down. I think all of their running backs at one point, were down. So I don't think there was a team out there. They lost both of their tackles. There wasn't a team that was hit more of the injury bug than the 49ers. So and they were just in the Super Bowl the year before that. And they got some great players, so they can get those guys coming back. I think they will be competing with the Rams. Man, you look at the Rams, and we'll see. They get the new quarterback, and everything's going to be taking shots down.
Well, hey, you want to talk about injuries? How are we going to leave out Matthew Stafford? Because he's got broken backs. He had a broken thumb and all these other injuries down the stretch of his career with the Detroit Lions. And now, big bad J.J. Watt is in his division, which isn't going to be all that scary. But he's got to go up against the 49ers defensive line twice per year, which I think is going to be a big challenge. So, look, when you look at the J.J. Watt, he's got injury issues. You look at the 49ers, they've all got injury issues. Matthew Stafford has injury issues. And because of the uncertainty with regards to Stafford's health, yeah, he might be healthy right now. And you look at their backup quarterback, whoever that guy was, that bum that started against the Packers, or not the Packers, the playoff game that they won against the Seahawks. It could be similar to when the Lions had to start guys not named Matthew Stafford last year. Now their backup or the remainder of their team is probably good enough that they could squeak out some wins against some bad teams, whereas that wasn't the case with the Lions. But let's not act like Stafford doesn't have injury issues as well.
I'll tell you what, he looked pretty good chilling out on that boat with Kelly. I don't know, the day before, I saw Kelly Stafford's IG, the bikini. Stafford had this, I don't know, looked like comic strip onesie on, man. He was just chilling, wearing his Rams hat backwards. Sunset out there in L.A. Looked pretty nice.
That's one of the good things about Stafford being gone is we don't have to hear more about Kelly Stafford's Instagram.
I like Kelly.
I know you do.
I like Kelly Stafford.
And her Instagram.
Well, they're nice pictures, man. Like, sun, who doesn't like the sun going down in the Pacific out of there on a yacht? They look like they're having a pretty good time. A little sunburn. It was the day before yesterday. Like, and it felt like 15 outside here, and it was 50 degrees like the day before that. So it was kind of muddy out here in Dexter, and then it all froze over. And I was thinking, man, Jared Goff sees those pictures of Kelly Stafford and Matt Stafford out there in the Pacific, and then
hold up a second. Let's not act like Jared Goff is poor and only has one house. He's probably got himself a condo or a nice little $3 million mansion here, but I can't imagine he's spending his late February and March in Detroit getting to know the community. I have to imagine that he might have been down in Cancun with Ted Cruz. He might have been on the boat right next to the Staffords that was just outside the picture. So with all the money he's got, with that $134 million about to kick in, I think Jared Goff is finding somewhere besides Metro Detroit to spend his time right now.
Fair. He might have been taking the picture of the Staffords.
There you go. That's right. This
would have been a really nice story. All right, let's go. Roger, with the question on the live chat on YouTube, says, would you guys be okay with the Lions taking Kyle Trask in the second round? Trask, the quarterback out of Florida.
No, I would not be okay with that. The way I look at the quarterback situation is, if Justin Fields is there at number 7, you consider him. You don't have to take him, but you consider him. But if you don't take a quarterback at number 7, if you want to take a guy in day 3 as a project, as a long-term backup for either Jared Goff or the quarterback that you draft next year, that's fine. But in terms of franchise quarterback, a guy who's not mobile and Trask, not all that interested in, I would wait until 2022 when you know you're going to have a high draft pick because your team is going to suck, and get someone who has a higher ceiling than Kyle Trask.
Yeah, he'd have to fall way past the second round for me to start considering him. I think the foot speed is the big thing. He's got a great arm, but that foot speed. I think that's going to be another question that we'll go for Thursday. Who would be some of the later round quarterbacks that we would look for, and what round would you go with them? See if we can remember that one too.
Yeah,
as we're building Thursday's show here on a Tuesday
on the fly.
That's the way to get things done.
Yep.
Now, if we can just remember those questions. All right, let's go to Trepa, who weighs in. I think the Rams will have at least half of the Detroit Lions fan base follow their team this season.
Oh, yeah, and they'll be rooting against them just like, well, no, I think it's going to be a split. I think that most will root against the Rams because they understand the draft pick conversation, but there are some big-time, grade A Stafford slappies who just want to see Stafford win, and they want proof that Matthew Stafford can get it done, can win the big game, can win the playoff game, can win the Super Bowl, so they can tell all their friends who were Stafford doubters, see, I told you, the Lions just needed to give him an offensive line and a defense and a run game and wide receivers and a great coach, and he can get it done. If they just give him everything, then he can be a good quarterback. And nobody ever doubts that. But, for the highest contract in NFL history, which he had at one time, you'd like the quarterback to be able to, lead a team to a division championship and or some playoff wins without having a perfect team around him. So I think those debates are going to continue, and a lot of the Lions fan base will be following Stafford's journey very intently.
No question. I think TC and BC, you guys are right on it. We're all going to be watching what's going on there with the Rams and be very interested in that. Beth on Facebook. We appreciate Beth being on Facebook and leaving messages and giving opinions here. She says, sounds like what the Pistons did with the Blake Griffin deal, and then her emoji is a smiling, cheesy smile emoji.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Jj Watt and Blake Griffin have some fair comparisons. Jj Watt is he was a decent NFL player last year. 16 games started, 5 sacks. That's not going to blow you out of the water, but that doesn't mean he was a complete bust. And he's being paid like he is a I'm not going to say a top-notch defensive end, not a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro, but he's being paid like a pretty good one. He's being overpaid. He's not being overpaid to the extent that Blake Griffin is, but that's because Blake Griffin has a monster contract that was signed many years ago. But if Blake Griffin gets cut and he signs with the team for the remainder of the season, let's say tomorrow, he's not going to be getting a 2-year, $31 million deal. He's going to be taking like the veterans minimum.
Good point. You ready to move on?
Yeah, let's turn the page now to the 4th chapter.
All right, that takes us to Michigan football. Busy week for the Wolverines as they start spring practice. They sign the top, or get a commitment, I should say, from the top player of the state. But they also make news with bringing in another quarterback. Joe Milton hit the transfer portal a couple of weeks ago. In comes Alan Bowman from Texas Tech. All right, chap, what is this? Here we go again with Michigan. How do you see a transfer QB coming in for Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines?
Yeah, here we go again is a perfect way to put it. I think the first thing you have to do is laugh if you're not a Michigan fan, and I'm not a Michigan fan. And if you are a Michigan fan and you see Alan Bowman coming in, you got to roll your eyes. Like, I mean, another transfer quarterback, and not just another transfer quarterback, another unimpressive transfer quarterback from the portal. You look at LSU, they get Joe Burrow from Ohio State. You look at Ohio State, they get Justin Fields from Georgia. You look at Oklahoma, they get Jalen Hurts from Alabama. And who does Michigan get? They get a guy who used to be at Iowa. Oh, they get a guy who used to be at Houston. And they had another transfer quarterback, I forget. And now they get a guy who used to be at Texas Tech and had a very nondescript, if not poor, 3 years at Texas Tech. This is a guy nobody ever heard of. There's a reason nobody's ever heard of him. You look at it, 2020, he had 1,602 yards over 8 games, which is almost exactly 200 yards per game. Not impressive. He had 430 of those yards in the first game against Houston Baptist. Not impressive. In his final game, he went 15-26 for 117 yards in a 16-13 win over Kansas, a basketball school. Hey, but
got the dub.
Yeah, he got the dub, and Les Miles is the coach, but 16-13 over Kansas, not impressive. Probably felt like a loss for Texas Tech. For the season, 10 touchdown passes, 7 interceptions. He completed 67% of his passes, which is great, but -9 rushing yards. He's not a threat to run, and that's for his career, 3 years at Texas Tech. 33 touchdowns, 17 picks. He was so bad this past year that a transfer quarterback by the name of Henry Colombi from Utah State replaced him during the middle of the year, and Colombi did not put himself in position to be on the Heisman watch list going into next year. 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 14 sacks in 6 games. This guy also has huge injury issues. 2018 missed several games with a partially collapsed lung. Came back only to have his lung collapse again. 2019 only played 3 games due to a shoulder injury. 2020 suffered a leg injury. So what does Michigan have? They've got an experienced quarterback in Alan Bowman, who gets hurt and throws interceptions and gets replaced by transfer quarterbacks from Utah State. If I'm a Michigan fan, I know they needed a quarterback because they had 2 guys hit the transfer portal and they only had 2 guys on the roster with a combined 71 passing attempts and 1 failed motivational speech after a 3 overtime win against Rutgers. They needed a warm body in the quarterback room, but I'm not excited about this if I'm a Michigan fan. If Alan Bowman is a starting quarterback in 2021 to start the season, Michigan is in for a train wreck, and McNamara and McCarthy are worse than Michigan fans hope they're going to be.
Yeah, you omitted the one transfer that was a 5-star that Michigan got under Harbaugh and Shea Patterson, but it's not like
that's the guy I forgot.
Yeah, he wasn't great, so you give him a pass on forgetting about Shea because he really was mostly forgettable there. The big part of this is what happened a couple weeks ago with Joe Milton leaving. Joe Milton apparently won the job this year. I mean, he was the starter, and then he busted his thumb against Wisconsin, and then, he didn't play well. And, now he's hitting the portal. I mean, the guy was in Josh Gaddis' system for 3 years. Like, if we were sitting here and he just stayed there's some issues there, but that's going to be another year in the system. He can fight it out with Cade McNamara. Then you got the 5-star coming in. That's a pretty healthy situation where they feel about the quarterback. But when he bolted, that left a huge gap there. And now they're just bringing in somebody that, if we're ranking him here, he's going to be, and the excitement level, he might even be 4th behind a, true freshman in Villari from last year. So, yeah, I mean, this is just filling out the roster. This is just somebody coming in. I don't think anybody expects that would be shocking, and it would portend bad news if Alan Bowman is your starter. If he takes any snaps for the Wolverines this year, that's bad news for Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to have experience, but we're talking about bad experience with Bowman, a guy who you have to assume would have stayed at Texas Tech if he hadn't been replaced by this Colombi guy who came from Utah State. But when you get benched because you're not playing well, you throw 7 interceptions, you're hurt and all that. And then if you're a Michigan fan, you're thinking, I think you have to look at these other programs and say, look at all these guys that are wanting to go to Ohio State and transfer to Oklahoma and all this, and how come we're getting the likes of Shea Patterson, and Shea Patterson was a highly recruited guy, but he comes in and he stinks, and maybe that's part of the reason why they couldn't get anybody better than that. But Justin Fields goes to our rival Ohio State. They don't have a quote unquote quarterback whisperer like J.I. Blockham Harbaugh. This is an absolute cast-off. Nobody had him on his radar whatsoever. If he didn't go to Michigan, he might have transferred to a MAC school. Best case scenario is that either Cade McNamara or J.J. McCarthy wins the starting job for Michigan. And I think if you're a Michigan fan, you don't even want to hear that at the end of spring practice, there's a 3-way race for the job. It better be McNamara versus McCarthy.
Yeah, it better be just. You're right about that. To be fair, Shea Patterson, I wasn't his biggest fan, but he didn't stink. He was decent his first year. His second year,
he was good enough to not get drafted. He was also good enough to, after he got drafted, wait several days until he signed with the Chiefs, and he didn't even stick on the team.
Yeah, he didn't stink. He was just all right.
Well, he certainly failed to live up to whatever the massive hype was around him. And I have to imagine that Alan Bowman projects to be worse than that in the 2022 or 2021 season.
Johnny says the only Bowman I want to hear about in Detroit is Scotty Bowman, not Alan Bowman. Roger says, don't be surprised if the Lions take the highest-rated offensive lineman at 7. That sounds like an SOL move. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised, Roger, if the Lions went with an offensive lineman. That's usually what. Actually, I would be surprised now that I think about it.
Yeah, that if they take an offensive lineman at 7, I mean that you would have to assume the only way they would do that is if they.
Sewell.
Well, it would have to be number 1, they get Sewell and they make him the right tackle, and number 2, they probably have to cut an offensive lineman. Now they just signed Vitae last year; he stunk. But if they cut him to save some money, perhaps they would do that. But even then, is it that big of a need? I guess if Sewell drops to number 7, that would be a huge steal. I still wouldn't do it if I was the same old Lions.
No, I think that they would move out at 7. Somebody would be coming up to get him at that point.
Yeah.
So I'll take that bet, Roger. You're not offering any bet. You're just saying don't be surprised. I would be surprised.
Yes, I would be surprised. I'd be surprised also if they take Kyle Pitts. Well, I shouldn't be.
No, I would be surprised if they took Kyle Pitts, too. I'd be very surprised. If they take a running back or tight end or an offensive lineman, I'll be surprised.
Or a punter.
Or a kicker.
Yes.
Kicker. All right, let's turn the page.
All right, let's turn the page now to the 5th chapter, and that gets us to the major wager. But before we get to the major wager, I know you're squinting your face because there's some bad news. I have more bad news to report, and that is an update from the Michigan versus Illinois game. See if you can see it on the screen right there. There it is. Illinois is up 45-29 in the second half. Yikes. We all thought that this was going to be another Michigan blowout victory. I certainly thought it was going to be a blowout victory, especially with Ayu Dosunmu out. but no DeSumo, no problem. So it looks like Michigan's time as the number 2 team in the country will be short-lived, with Baylor winning today in overtime. And Michigan, while there's still time to come back, they lost the first half by 11, and they're down 14-9 in the second half. So it's now 47-31 Illini in Ann Arbor. Yikes! But now now we can get to the major wager, and that's what we can give you guys some advice when it comes to your sports betting, and we also have an opportunity for you to, if you have not gotten a sports betting app, you can get the DraftKings app, and if you're using YouTube right now, you'll see a link right down there. Click on that, and you have the opportunity to, via the refer a friend option, get free sports betting money with DraftKings. So make sure you take a look at that when you have the opportunity if you're on YouTube. I'll see if I can get that link also into Facebook after the show ends. But Dennis, give us a quick reminder of what you bet on Thursday and what you were looking at in today's action.
Well, did I bet Michigan? I had a loser. Whatever it was a loser. I remember I went with Michigan, Iowa, and so Thursday I came back with I don't remember who I picked, so it had to be in the Big Ten. It was another loser. And then today I went with West Virginia plus 4.5. And it was a really good game against Baylor. Man, back and forth, awesome college basketball game, and it looked like it was just a one-possession game. Looked like West Virginia was going to win it a couple times, and then Baylor made a couple plays, and then it went into OT, and Baylor won by 5.
Yeah, that was a tough one. Whenever you lose a game like that by a half point, especially if it goes to overtime, you're thinking, hey, it's a close game, whatever, just stay within 4.5 points. You lose that by a half point, it's a gut-wrenching game. And quick side note, I was going to bet that game, West Virginia to win on the money line beforehand. I think it was at plus 165, and I didn't get the game. I forgot about the game until they were about 20 minutes in, and I saw that West Virginia was down by like 10 points, and at that point it was like plus 460. And I was like, hey, West Virginia's going to win this game. And the fact that they had that lead late, I was feeling pretty good, and then they blew it. So I feel some of your pain.
Michigan, Iowa was Thursday. So, I remember I saying, like, I looked at the game, Michigan, Iowa, Michigan, Illinois. I didn't think they were going to win both of those games. And getting 5 points against, Michigan, Iowa, I thought, that was the play. And then, Michigan blew out Iowa. And then tonight, without DeSumo, even though the line was 8, I just thought, you know what? Without Illinois' best player, I don't feel like, rolling the dice. And I keep picking against Michigan's. But, of course, that would have been the right play.
Yeah, especially tonight. As far as my major wager is concerned, on Thursday, I had Idaho State on the money line. They were plus 120 at home to upset Montana State, and Idaho State lost at home, so that was a bad pick. Tonight, I'm going with the Milwaukee Bucks minus 8. That game's at 9 p.m., so it starts in a little over half an hour. There's still time to bet on the game. The Bucks have won 5 in a row, and here's the key. They had some stumbling. They've been stumbling a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but that was because Drew Holiday was out with coronavirus. He came back in the last game, and they were able to beat the Clippers. This is his second game back. It's a home game for the Bucks. Those are all reasons to take them minus 8. They're playing the Nuggets, who are a tough team, but the Nuggets are playing the second game of a back-to-back. They only won by 6 yesterday in Chicago. Their rookie guard, Facu Campazzo, is out for the Nuggets, so I say lay the 8 points and take the Bucks and win yourself a little bit of money.
Sounds like a good bet to me. All right, chap, we appreciate it, and we appreciate everybody watching the show. Coming up on Thursday's show, if the Lions go for a late-round quarterback, who should that quarterback be? We'll get to that and 4 other interesting chapters coming up on Thursday's 5th chapter. For Brian Chapman, I'm Dennis Fithian. Thanks for watching. Good night.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state when that light turns red. So don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fith chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spittin' the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fith chapter.